So Rich, let's check out Apple's Final Cut Pro 10. You know, Final Cut Pro 10 is one of those things that we don't need to discuss in detail. It's a lot of discussion out there, but I personally actually really like it and think it has a lot of cool tools, and it does make the task of stabilizing a shot really straightforward. It's actually a two-step process, right?
Yeah.
You sort of need to analyze the footage so Final Cut Pro 10 can sort of tell what's going on, and then you need to apply that stabilization data that it's gained from analyzing the clip to stabilize the actual clip.
And the way that it approaches this is that the analysis can be done upon import. So a lot of folks will import their footage with analysis checked, and then it can run sometimes as a background process, or sometimes it happens during the import stage. It depends on the formats that you're working with, the version. But let's say I didn't do it on import. I could just right-click and choose Analyze and Fix. And what I'm going to essentially do then is choose Analyze for Stabilization and Rolling Shutter.
Yep.
And while I'm at it, I might as well analyze for balance color.
You can fix audio problems, but those options are fun.
Yeah, we'll click OK, and it begins the process. Now, you know it began the process by looking right here at this "it never goes fast enough" count-up clock, but it's a background task.
Well, and this is a good point, though. This is one of the reasons that I like to do this on import. As you mentioned, you can do it on import, and it is a background task. So when you go ahead to your camera memory card, you can just sort of grab everything, import it, analyze it for balance color, analyze it for stabilization and rolling shutter. And the cool thing about Final Cut Pro 10 is that you can continue to work while this analyzation is happening in the background. And you know, as Rich pointed out, the analyzation is done when that clock there in the center of the main interface changes to say 100%. Now in this case, we have a couple clips that are each about 15 seconds long or so.
Yeah.
So it takes a second or two, but it's done on a couple of those clips. And if you bring up the background task menu, you can actually see its progress right there. Just twirl that down.
Yeah, and I should see that by clicking on that number there. It popped it up, and you could see how it's doing on each individual clip. So as it goes through here, when this first clip is done, we'll look at it. Notice I see the overall progress, and I see each individual clip. Now that does take a little bit as it's happening, so we kind of just have to sit here and let it finish, which is why do it on import, let it run overnight.
Yeah, because typically you're not going to be worried about stabilization, while you're editing, right? I mean, that's more of a finishing task, so that's why it's really nice to have this happen in the background. Okay, Rich, so we're back. All that analyzation has taken place. Now, I just want to be clear about a couple things. That stabilization analyzation is pretty complicated, right? Where it's tracking all these points and that kind of stuff. So
it's at least AP level math.
Yeah. So, it does take a little time, obviously, the beefier your system, all that kind of stuff, yada, 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 it will go faster. But all the analyzation has taken place. And before we actually do any analyzation, let's just take a look at a couple of these clips and see what the original shots look like.
Sure. Well, a couple of this footage, you were with me. Like this, we were in Amsterdam, just shooting on the street, and no rigs, no tripods, total handheld. We're just swinging, following this action. Here's a shot that's supposed to be locked off. Legs were spread a little bit, not perfectly even. And then I jump on over to Panama here for a second, and this is a pure, I'm walking down a really broken path. I really should be looking at these rough stairs. These are like logs and tree roots. Walking through rocks and bumps. I mean, this is not ideal, and I'm walking with just the 3 points of contact. That's purposefully bad. I'd like to say that I did it that bad on purpose.
That's what they all say.
Yeah, and then here I'm walking across a suspension bridge. There was piranhas down below and a raging river.
Piranhas.
Yeah, piranhas.
Wow.
No, but I was walking across this very rickety suspension bridge. So you see there's a lot of shake there.
Yeah, and so the cool thing about using Final Cut Pro 10 to stabilize your footage, we've already done step 1, as I alluded to when we first started talking. Step 2 is a piece of cake. So let's find one of these shots that we want to stabilize.
Yeah, let's start with the easy one here. The second shot that was basically supposed to be a lockdown and wasn't.
But it had a little movement to it. So go ahead and press Command 4, and Command 4 opens up your video inspector, and then you have various options here, but if you scroll down towards the bottom, you'll notice that there's a stabilization category there, and there you go. Turn on stabilization, undo it for a second. There you go, there's your original shot. Notice when we click on it, it actually pushes in a little bit. Because remember, anytime that you're stabilizing things, you're probably gonna have to get rid of those edges around the side. Now, the cool thing about this is that we do have smoothing abilities with the stabilization control. Yeah. So how smooth we're going to adjust rotation, how smooth if it needs to zoom in or zoom back out, how we're going to adjust that scale.
So I've selected the shot with the bike, and we'll scroll down. There's stabilization, and let's just, quite a big magnification there, right? And as we increase that smoothness, it pushes in further and further. Same with as you bring up things for rotation and scale.
Right.
So now, much smoother as it pans to follow the action. Not perfect. Little bump on the headroom, though.
But it looks much better. And now the cool thing about this is that right now you'll notice the orange line over these two clips, indicating that we're having to render. Now, if, Rich, on this particular machine, we don't have background rendering enabled. And if you go up to your preferences, you can actually enable that. So just Final Cut Pro menu and then down to preferences, and then go over to playback, and then click on background render. You can choose after X amount of seconds of me not doing anything, automatically render that stuff in the background, which makes it nice so you can, don't have to wait to render. It can render when you go to lunch or something like that.
Yeah, now I'll push that out usually to about 2 minutes or so. As you see there, a bigger number, because I don't want to have to get in and out of it. But that's fine. I've pushed that to the background. Here's this really bumpy shot, and we'll go ahead and deal with that. Let's turn on the stabilization.
Yep.
And we'll see how it does. A lot better there, especially given how much the movement. Now, you saw some of that jello, that shake.
Yeah, yep. Now, that often happens when we don't have, the smoothness needs to be adjusted in the shot. So you can play around with that smoothness. Now, one of the things you have to realize about stabilizing a shot is that on very bad situations where you have piranhas about to bite you from below in the river, you might have to sort of have a balancing act of having a little movement into it to not have those artifacts in those shots.
Well, let's see how this one looks. Again, a little bit of that shake and some of that vibration in jello. It's pretty hard.
And it is unrendered as well.
But if we reduce that and say, you know what, don't be so aggressive, smooth it out just a little bit, and we'll put that down.
So just render that clip, little Control R on the keyboard to activate that, and you'll notice you're still getting a little of that. So it's a little bit of a balancing act between, adjusting some of these smooth parameters to get rid of it, and we can sort of dial that in, dial that out to taste. But the idea is that it's a very quick two-step process with Final Cut Pro 10. First, analyze the clip. Next, apply that analyzation data by going and opening the inspector and opening up the stabilization area and enabling the stabilization.
So I played with the rolling shutter reduction and the stabilization, and I think that's helping a little. Now, we still have some vibration there. This is not a perfect solution. This was a really hard shot to fix, and you do need to realize that stabilization only works so far. It's great for shots that are clear environment, but here we're in a low light, we're on a bouncing platform and a bouncing camera. That's like double shake. The ground was moving and I was moving.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is that what I tell clients all the time is, what is the motivation behind the stabilization? I understand it can be annoying if you have a little wobble, right? But something like when you're going across a bridge, and Rich was apparently, in the throes of death with
absolutely.
Piranhas
Dodging
about to attack,
piranhas.
dodging piranhas. That bouncing and that movement might not be a bad thing.
Yeah, actually, it should feel that way because that's what it was like to be on the bridge.
Exactly.
So the point here is that sometimes stabilization works, sometimes it doesn't. If you're on a stable platform and you're just handheld and shaky, or you get a bump in the move, it works great. If you're trying to move across a rough surface, I'm walking downstairs, this is why things like motorized rigs and Steadicams exist, because it's really hard to fix that in post.
Very cool. So up next, we'll check out stabilizing footage inside of Adobe Premiere Pro. It's a very similar process, so be sure to come on back and check that out.